Welcome to Toon'd, where I review cartoons. No matter how new, no matter how old, no matter the cost. I'm Josh the Fox Mills. Folks, we all have a conscience. What if we were in a terrible accident and all of a sudden our conscience was replaced by iconic Disney characters? Well, this for the most part is the plot of today's cartoon. Come back after the credits, and we'll slog through the train wreck known as Out of Jimmy's Head. Jimmy's Head ran for 20 episodes from 2007 to 2008 and was advertised as Cartoon Network's first live-action series. Kinda contradictory if you ask me. Since the movie was basically the first episode of the series, I'll start with said movie. Reanimated. Milt Appleday was a celebrated cartoonist who had died and had his brain frozen, very similar to the myth about the remains of Walt Disney. Our main character, Jimmy, is a very easily manipulated rube who is dared to find, dig up, and retrieve Milt Appleday's frozen brain by a bunch of punk popular kids. During his efforts, he encounters Milt's clumsy middle-aged son, Sonny Appleday, who is after the brain himself. After being spotted by Sonny, Jimmy attempts to escape and is hit by a train in the process. Now in the hospital, Jimmy's brain was replaced by Milt's frozen brain, but it's still Jimmy inside, as the doctors were able to save his so-called personality gland. I'm pretty sure that's not a part of the human brain. Also, that's not how brain surgery works! In any case, Jimmy can now see the iconic Appleday characters in his head, and they influence his day-to-day life. Now let me get this straight. This kid gets into an accident and winds up with the creative part of legally not Walt Disney's brain, and now sees not legally Walt Disney's trademark characters in his head. Huh. Also apparently, he is put in charge of the Appleday Cartoon Company, since he's now thinking with Milt's brain. That's not how companies work! In the show, the scheming Sonny Appleday would cartoonishly attempt to murder Jimmy on a weekly basis to retrieve his father's brain so that he could use it to gain notoriety as a cartoonist, and somehow through that, take over the world. If that's not the dumbest plan for world conquest, I'll eat my hat!
You're not wearing a hat!
I was hungry. The characters that only Jimmy could see were Golly and Dolly Gopher, Tux the Penguin, voiced by Tom Kenny, and Crocco the Alligator. The show didn't last very long, and for good reason, as the plot was silly, the acting was stilted, and the show alternated between confusing and boring. Sometimes the real-life actors and plots for episodes were more silly than the cartoon characters. I've wasted enough time on this tragic accident of a show, so it's time to find out.
What does the fox say?
This show probably wouldn't make it on my list of cartoons I hate, if not for the commercials that were trying so desperately to cram it down my throat at the time. It wasn't really as bad as it could be, and mostly was just there. Still, the concept of seeing cartoon characters in this way would be done much better by Disney with a show called Kirby Buckets. There isn't much I can really say about this. It just wasn't worth the hype given to it. Next week, I continue with shows that I really didn't like, as I take a look at the wacky world of Tex Avery. Does it live up to its legendary namesake? For the answer to that question, you'll just have to stay tuned.